And good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 25:14 and following, and the return of the absent master. And we are focused at the present time on Matthew chapter 24, 29 and following. Now, I hope you go back and I hope you'll listen very, very carefully to what I presented to you and for you in yesterday's video, because it's really an important lead-in to what we are about to see this morning. In Matthew 24, 29 and following, Jesus, after saying that his living, breathing apostles would see the abomination of desolation, which, by the way, was foretold by Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, and Daniel chapter 12, 10 and following, to happen at the time of the destruction of the power of the holy people, Daniel chapter 12, verse 7, okay? So we know the framework, we know the context for the abomination of desolation, the time of judgment on Jerusalem and Israel. That's the context of Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, which, by the way, did not happen at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Real quick digression here. I'm putting the finishing touches on a multi-volume set of DVDs on when did or when will the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9, 24 to 27 come to an end. It's about 15, 16 videos so far. Each video is in the neighborhood of 45 to 50 minutes long. I'll be making that available to you in the very near future. I really like this series that I have done. And obviously, to limit it to 15, 16, 17 videos is somewhat restrictive, but I didn't want it to go to, 540 videos. Yeah. Okay, so be watching for that, because there will be an announcement on that in the very, very near future. So we have the promise and the prediction, Daniel chapter 9, the abomination of desolation at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, which again did not take place in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. We have the abomination of desolation, Daniel chapter 12, within the context and the framework of the time of the resurrection. Oh, and the great tribulation, Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. And we come to Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus is talking about the abomination of desolation, which his apostles would see, and he promised them that in the context of their question, which they asked when he predicted the destruction of the temple and the city. So we have Daniel 9, Daniel 12, Matthew 24, all focused on, all contextualized about the fall of Jerusalem, the judgment of Jerusalem, and yet we're supposed to see totally different, totally irrelevant applications of those passages. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's not doing honor to either hermeneutic or exegesis or logic. It's a disservice. So, once again, you have the abomination of desolation, you have the great tribulation, and immediately after the tribulation of those days leading up to the actual destruction, and those were unbelievably horrific times. So anyway, they will see the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. Now please, I'm not going to take the time to go back over the territory, but here's what's interesting about this passage. Now look, please understand, I'm not giving what I'm about to say as definitive proof. But it's interesting because in my center column references, now are center column references inspired? No, they are not. I understand that. But here's what is true. The men who formulated the center column references were, by and large, men who were intimately familiar with both Testaments. That doesn't mean they properly applied both Testaments. I'm simply saying they knew in this New Testament text, you have the following citation, and it's taken from this text over here. Well, guess where my center column reference, and every center column reference that I'm familiar with, obviously could have missed some, But every center column reference that I am familiar with, that I have looked at, says when Jesus said, they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, they say that's directly from Daniel 7:13 and 14. Take that for what it's worth, all right? But once again, these are men that are familiar with the New Testament uses of the Old Testament passages. And so this accumulated scholarship says, well, you know, in Matthew 24, verse 30, Jesus predicted the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven. Daniel 7 predicted the coming on the clouds of heaven. Well, obviously, Matthew chapter 24, 29 and following, is not talking about the ascension of Acts chapter 1. The coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven in power and great glory of Matthew chapter 24, verse 30, would come after the abomination of desolation, after the flight of the apostles from Jerusalem, after the ascension, after the flight of the apostles from Jerusalem, after the great tribulation. And yet Jesus is saying, Daniel 7:13 and 14 will be fulfilled at that time, after the abomination of desolation, after the flight of the apostles and the church, and after the great tribulation. That means, ladies and gentlemen, Daniel 7:13 and 14 was not a prediction of the ascension. It was the prediction of the coming of the Son of Man, as we have pointed out repeatedly, on the clouds of heaven in the judgment of the little horn, the great persecutor of the people of God, which was none other than Old Covenant Israel. Wasn't Rome, wasn't Nero, it was Old Covenant Israel. So Jesus said, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the heavens, and then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to cut this video short. Next Monday, I'm going to pick up on Matthew 24, verse 30. We're going to talk about all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. And we're going to talk about next week, we're going to talk about the coming of the Son of Man with the sound of the great trumpet. And you're going to see, as scholar after scholar after scholar admits and agrees, Jesus was quoting from Isaiah 27:13. And when that admission is made, it is an admission that the coming of the Son of Man on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, being a fulfillment of Daniel 7, would also be the time of the resurrection of the dead at AD 70. You don't want to miss what I'm going to offer next week. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me for today's morning musings, and don't forget to get yourself a copy of my book, AD 70, A Shadow of the Real End, ? Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and order the book. Make mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. So, you have a fantastic weekend. Please be safe. God bless. See you next week.